There was a disease in the 19th century, known as yellow fever, and it killed lots of people. People were afraid of it, etc. And today, there's a modification of that uh, disease, and people are very scared of it. It's known as yellow fear. Everybody and their mother is scared of China. China's taking over the world, and people are so scared. They don't know what to think. They're worried, So we call it yellow fear. Okay, and here are some examples. Okay, here's the first one. We have China slams U.S. on debt limit and accuses Washington of sabotage. And essentially says that the Chinese embassy, one of them there in Zambia, blasted the U.S. over its catastrophic debt problem and accused it of sabotaging other nations' efforts to resolve debt problems. The embassy said the biggest contribution that the U.S. can make to the debt issue outside the country is to act on responsible monetary policies, cope with its own debt problem, and stop sabotaging other sovereign countries' active efforts to solve their debt issues. And so it says there that the Treasury's measures give it space for some months before it runs out of cash. Okay, economists and bond market analysts anticipate the ceiling will have to be raised sometime in the third quarter to avert a U.S. payments default. Okay, which is damaging for the world's biggest economy as well as the global financial system. So that's the accusation that the Chinese launched against the United States. And on the other side, on the Western side, people are worried about China again, this yellow fear. And this is what one fellow has to say about it, what he recommends. He says, freeing the U.S. economy from China will create an American industrial renaissance and millions of good paying jobs. Fellow thinks that the United States can go back to manufacturing. Here we have in the West, almost every country, every advanced nation, about 85% of their economies are services. Manufacturing has been, muscled out of the economy, out of the gross national product and GDP, And it turns out that, all these countries only have like 15 to 20% of their economy, both in terms of labor and in terms of GDP, is manufacturing, a relatively small percentage. Before World War II, you have had much higher percentages of manufacturing. But slowly and slowly, the manufacturing age died off. Industrialization came downwards, and what took off was services. As people, as a lot of the corporations became automated, and assembly lines and so on, and they could produce things more efficiently. They pushed people out of the manufacturing jobs, the blue collar jobs, into white collar jobs. And so all the jobs today, or most of them, are services. And economy is mainly services. Agriculture came down to 1 or 2%, maybe 3 in some countries. It's a small percentage of the global economy, and especially of the advanced nations, and a small percentage of GDP as well. Hunter-gathering, we don't do that anymore. Maybe some tribe out there. It used to be 100%. Just 50,000 years ago, hunter-gathering was the top activity. 100% of people engaged in that type of job or market or mode of production. Now it's practically gone. Anyway, it says this fellow wants to decouple from the Chinese economy, and says now decoupling from China now could launch an American industrial renaissance and also create millions of good-paying U.S. jobs. After 20 years, it's clear that trade liberalization has failed to transform China into an ally, a partner, or even a more democratic society. In fact, the opposite has happened. Okay, he says, with Beijing already massively subsidizing its state-owned companies, it makes no sense to allow each continued duty-free access, such continued duty access. So he wants to, he's recommending that, they increase tariffs on Chinese products, and maybe that way, that's been always the policy of different countries. You raise tariffs, and that way you protect the local industry, meaning they can operate more inefficiently, right? Because you're protecting them through tariffs from outside commerce, okay? And okay, so that's what this fellow suggests. Not everybody agrees with that. A lot of people are free marketers. They say, the market should be totally free. This person says, no, let's protect our industry. And a lot of people don't like that. And here's he suggests that. And here's one case that I've talked about in the past. Here's another article on that, and that is that the U.S. needs more than CHIPS Act to stay ahead of China, from an MIT report. It says America used to be the leader in chip manufacturing or fabrication, as it's known. They're talking about not potato chips. They're talking about integrated circuits, but it now builds just 12% of the world's semiconductors. So you can see that it's a relatively small percentage for such a big country. And even though the government has taken steps to limit China's ability, to access high-end American technologies, they would like to keep, China downwards, not getting all the equipment necessary to manufacture high-end chips. It says the Commerce Department is getting set to announce how companies can apply for funds from the multi-billion project. Okay, so they're creating a fund there, which is aimed at what? Bringing more semiconductor manufacturing back to the U.S. and incentivizing firms to research cutting-edge technologies that will give American companies an edge over international rivals, primarily China, obviously. And Fowler says, if the government and American businesses manage to come together, the country should be able to hold on to its lead in the tech industry. If not, China will likely grab the lead in its businesses and military will supplant the U.S. as the top dog on the international stage. Okay, so they're worried a little bit about this, this yellow fear, that China might surpass the United States in chip manufacturing, not only in quantity, but also in quality. Okay, in other words, that they achieve cutting edge technology level. Okay? And so what's the result they're creating, because they've already created this, there's a plant in Ohio and another one in Arizona that they're building. I think they'll be operational by the year 24, 26, thereabouts, where the United States is, again, trying to manufacture its own chips and not, give them to other countries like Taiwan, which is close to China. Imagine if that happens to fall, what would happen, especially to the car industry that relies on chips so much. So that they're trying to get a lot of that manufacturing back. And the question is, yeah, they can do that. The question is, will that be subsidized first? Because they're talking about, the United States government working with private industry, meaning subsidizing. And it kind of makes you think whether they're defeating the purpose. The United States prides itself as being a country that functions on pure capitalism. But here they're taking the road that China took, which is government and industry work together hand in hand to protect the country's interests. And so it's like they're more into the mixed economy than they are in either capitalism or communism. Neither China is communist, neither the United States is capitalist. They're all kind of in the center. They have all these mixed economies where, wherever it's needed, government intervenes and helps industries, either through tariffs or by subsidizing them or whatever it takes to maintain the lead, especially in high-end technologies. So they're all becoming the same, east and west. That's why I take no part in any side. I think they're all the same. They're all tyrants. They all run their economies in the same way, more or less. There is no free market out there, especially for the important products that a country wants to defend. Those are all to some degree protected, subsidized, etc. And so they're all coming up with the same form of government or economic system. Okay? Whether you believe that or not, well, that's what I believe. They're all the same. Okay, here's a couple more examples. China fear, yellow fever, yellow fear. Okay. Here's the Telegraph from England. It says, our global order is in deep trouble. And they're talking about the Soviet Union turning into Russia and China coming together, and they're working together against the West. Okay, but it says, when one of the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council illegally invades another state, another permanent member then refuses to condemn that invasion, and the other 3 offer no collective strategy to check this blatant breach of international law, then humanity has entered a dark, unpredictable chapter. And it says that both Putin and Xi both feel threatened by what? An international rules-based order that calls for greater freedoms, democratic accountability, and transparency. Okay, and so they say, well, the West is democratic, has freedoms, etc., but these Eastern nations, Russia and China primarily, they don't have that. Okay, and I don't know about that. Again, I have my grave doubts. Let me give you an example of democracy and freedom. Okay, here you have it. Okay. Here we have the Rabbani Brothers. They leave Guantanamo Bay without charge after almost 20 years. Two brothers from Pakistan who were held in the U.S. military prison at Guantanamo Bay for nearly 20 years have been released without charge. Abdul and Mohammed Rabbani were arrested in Pakistan in 2002. The Pentagon said Rabbani operated an al-Qaeda safe house while his brother organized travel and funds for the group's leaders. And for this, they got this 20 years. But they weren't tried. They weren't sent to, a judge or anything like that. They were just captured and put away. The brothers alleged they were tortured by CIA officers before being transferred to Guantanamo. In 2013, Ahmed began a series of hunger strikes that lasted for 7 years. He would survive on nutritional supplements, sometimes forcibly fed to him through a tube. Both men were approved for release in 2021. It is unclear why they remained imprisoned. Both have now been repatriated to Pakistan. What is it called? Freedom and democracy? Justice? I mean, obviously they are terrorists because they wear beards and mustache. They're obviously terrorists. But where's this freedom that they talk about and rule of law and all this other stuff? I mean, it sounds a lot like what Hitler did when Germany invaded Poland. They made these concentration camps, and they would take citizens and non-citizens alike, from Germany out there, where they were beyond the law of the land. They didn't want to get in trouble with the law of the land. So as long as you did it in Poland and you did it over there with the military and the Gestapo and all these other people, the SS, then it's okay. You do that all secretly, and people don't hear about it, and they don't see it, and so it's all okay, because you can't bring charges, and and if you're one of the persons who goes to one of these prisons or concentration camps or whatever you want to call them, well, no, you have no rights, and you can't challenge it in court because you're isolated from the legal system, and that seems like what Guantanamo looks like. I mean, be honest, what is Guantanamo? Why don't they have it in Florida or in California or New York? No, it had to be out there, beyond the reach of the law, the long arm of the law, right? And here's another instance, okay? It says, protest in Berlin over arming Ukraine against Russia draws thousands. Maybe it was hundreds of thousands, but they said it was 10,000. And I guess that's to some degree immaterial. But it says, I want you to look at this. It says, police mobilize 1,400 officials to keep the peace and to enforce what? Bans on military uniforms, Russian and Soviet flags, Russian military songs, and right-wing symbols. In other words, these are the freedoms. You're allowed to do anything, but you're not allowed to have Russian flags or sing Russian military songs, let alone other things, that they've got out there. And the question is this the freedom all these people talk about, they boast about? I mean, here in Germany, you're not allowed to sing the first verse of the national anthem because it says Germany over all, over everybody, right? And they're a little ashamed of that verse specifically because of what Hitler did, right? They were proud of that verse in those days, but today they're a little embarrassed by that because it's like saying, oh, we're superior to everybody else. And so they don't sing that one. And so you have all these prohibitions and self-prohibitions, like, we're not going to sing that verse. And you call that freedom? So, again, I don't think there's that much difference between the West and the East. That's my personal opinion, okay? And I talked about these two guys the other day, Bugs Moran and Al Capone, two mafiosi in Chicago, 1920s, early 30s. And one guy, Bugs, he had the north side. He had that red territory. That's what he controlled. At some point, Al Capone controlled the south. Okay, who should you go with? Should you go with Bugs or with Al? I mean, who do you think is better? Vote for one of them for for president, mayor of the city, you know? No, I don't think you would choose any of them because neither one was better than the other. They just did what they had to do. They were businessmen, means they were murderers, assassins. That's what a businessman is. If he has to murder someone, he'll do it. Try to do it quietly, you know, with the right people. That's the way democracy functions. Okay, no difference than communism or any of the others supposedly tyrannical systems out there. And so here you have today's situation. Who should you vote for? Should you go with Bugs or with Al? West side or east side? So all he changes north south to east west, right? And Bugs, you know, he's got some credits to his or some points to his credit right there. You have Hiroshima and you have the West Side gang beating up on Vietnam. Okay, on the other side you have the Soviets. You could say the Russians again. You know, attacked Afghanistan. There was a war there, and they finally had to get out. And now you have this Ukraine operation. Who should you vote for? I mean, should it be on the east side or the west side? So you see where I'm headed with all this. You know, when you take sides, you're kind of being brainwashed a little bit. You know, it doesn't really concern you very much. It concerns only the politicians and what they want for for their own country, for their own turf. You know, I'd rather not take sides anymore. I used to take sides, but no more. I learned my lesson. I hope you learn yours. And here's a final issue for the yellow of fear. Okay, here we have NASA desperately trying to mine the moon before China gets there. A new space race is warming up between U.S. and China as each nation clamors to return to the moon. A new NASA solicitation reinforces its interest in mining the moon, following previous comments from NASA administrator about U.S. Need to get there first. NASA hopes to recruit university researchers to investigate ways to use metal mined from the moon's surface layer. There are certain metals we might be able to extract in different parts of the moon, and we might need to start manufacturing them if we are going to build things on the moon. NASA administrator said we better watch out that China doesn't get to a place on the moon under the guise of scientific research. Okay, so there's this race to the moon to some degree. Okay, some people don't believe we can get out of the earth or even to the moon or any place out there, especially the flat earthers. Okay, but I guess the question is, are you worried about catching yellow fear? And my suggestion to you is don't worry about it. You know, don't worry about it at all, because the United States will never allow China to catch up with it or to surpass it. Before that happens, there will be an incident. Mafias don't allow, they've learned their lesson, so they won't allow in this day and age for another mafia to take over, to surpass them, to take over their turfs. It's not going to happen. The United States will be the last major empire on earth, and that's how the world will end. Okay, that's my 5 cents worth on that.